in the time after Charlie Kirk's passing, I've been trying to figure out what's going on and why we have so different emotional reactions to this event. And I've been trying to figure out my own emotional reactions to the whole thing. I myself am progressive leaning. I've been socialized progressive my entire life, and yet I was more touched by this very event than I have been by the Democrats passing as of recently. That event I just noticed is something that just blipped shortly on my radar and then it was gone. It was like, oh, the next shooting in which Democrats were killed. Well, yeah, this is the world we're living in today. It's tragic, but it's not really. It didn't really touch me more. Um, than just briefly noticing it. Well, the Charlie Kirk event, that was really one of the more significant emotional reactions I've had in the past year, and it's something that really that really struck me badly, and I felt close to a person that I otherwise really don't feel close to. I've listened to some of his content, and I well, I couldn't say I couldn't disagree more, but I definitely disagreed on many issues with him, and yet I had a stronger emotional reaction to the whole thing than I expected. And particularly then looking back at emotional reactions from my own camp, from the progressive camp, I was kind of surprised that to see sometimes the mocking expression, sometimes indifference, and sometimes the claim that people couldn't feel bad for someone who objectively brought evil into the world. That's not my experience, and I was trying to figure out why I experienced this differently than other people do, and why I obviously experience it differently than conservatives do. And the way I'm trying to make sense of this is that to me it seems we are not resonating with Charlie Kirk as a human being. We're not treating him as a human being, and we're not feeling what we feel for this very event of his assassination as a human being being killed, but we experience him as a symbol for something. We experience Charlie Kirk to be symbolizing something. On the right, I think it's very obvious what people think he stands for. Charlie Kirk symbolizes are things like hope, are things like integrity, are things like motivation, are things like orientation, right? Things like clarity, and many different things. So when you ask people on the right, like, what did you take from Charlie Kirk? It's not, oh, I took how to hate liberals. That's usually not what you hear. You usually hear positive things about having found a way to formulate your self identity so that you know who you are, without defining you against somebody else or without deriving your identity as a position against somebody else. So people usually come up with very positive concepts that I think resonate with most of us, independently of whether we are right leaning or left leaning. Things like, for example, standing up for your family and orienting yourself around people that are close to you and emphasizing that. Excellence, yada yada yada. There are like dozens, I think, of positive notions that you could see conservatives taking out from Charlie Kirk. While when you talk, on the other hand, to people who are coming more from the left, of course, what they see is not Charlie Kirk, the person either. They don't have an I-thou relationship, as Buber puts it, with Charlie Kirk either, but they also have an I-it relationship to Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk to them also represents something. He stands, he substitutes something else. He's symbol for something else. And in this case, of course, it's negative things. Of course, what people on the left see him symbolize is the normalization, for example, of hatred, the normalization of abusive relationships, and so on and so on. And you can go through social media. There are like endlessly many different examples of things that Charlie Kirk supposedly said, which are just not what he meant in this specific context, but which in all of these cases are negative things that people have taken out of Charlie Kirk. And I believe it's by virtue of his symbolism, of him representing something, that Charlie Kirk actually brings forth emotional reactions within us, either extremely positive or negative emotional reactions. So by virtue of narrative, Charlie Kirk becomes actually close to us. Narrative creates proximity, if you want. It's not by virtue of his humanity that we feel bad for the very situation, but it's by virtue of what Charlie Kirk, the person, symbolizes and represents to us, that we feel bad in this very situation. Think about it. We're not treating Charlie Kirk as the person, because as a person, he is equal to everybody else who passes, right? He is not more of a human being or less of a human being. So you should experience the same kind of grief that you experience towards a random homeless person that you have absolutely no relation to passing, right? And yet that's not your experience. You should experience the same kind of grief towards the Democrats, for example, who have been murdered. Not the same thing. You still don't have this kind of experience. Experience seems to be triggered by the symbolic content of what people stand for and what their ideas stand for us. In this would actually also explain my personal reaction to the whole thing, because me too, I'm not reacting to Charlie Kirk's passing as a human being, because there are millions of people dying every day, and don't feel touched as I felt touched by his passing. But what's triggering, I guess, the emotional reaction in me is that still this event of Charlie Kirk's assassination represents to me something. It represents to me someone having been killed, who, even though I disagreed with him, was still playing perfectly within the rules. He was sometimes using the rules to his advantage, the rules of free speech, for example, but he was still playing perfectly within the rules. This is, I think, how you would do politics if you were to do politics the way he did it. And someone like that being killed is significant because it represents something. It represents how we deal with political disagreements in general. Again, it's not Charlie Kirk the person here, which I guess raises these emotions in me, but what he represents in this context, namely somebody who is still willing to disavow any form of violence and do everything he did through discourse, and seeing that being destroyed, to me is shocking. So I guess here as well, I'm not seeing Charlie Kirk the person, but I'm seeing Charlie Kirk the symbol, just with the difference that to me he symbolizes something different than he does to the left, generally speaking, I think, maybe because I've listened to some of his content. And he also symbolizes something different than what he represents to the right as well. Because if you asked me, like, what did you take from Charlie Kirk, it wouldn't be the examples that most conservatives would come up with, the positive and shining examples of self-identity. But I mean, I could come up with other positive things that maybe Republicans didn't notice as valuable, but I think are valuable and are important to maintain. And this is the way I would explain my emotional reaction to the whole thing and people's emotional reaction to the whole thing. And the tragic thing about this is that it's going in a really bad direction, because if you look at what Republicans are expecting right now to happen, is they're expecting progressives to have the same emotional reactions to this very horrible event as they do. And this by definition is not possible, because our emotions are driven by the symbolic meaning of events, of persons, and of their statements. And what, in other words, Republicans are expecting is that liberals are experiencing the same emotions when seeing their flag. In this case, Charlie Kirk is representing their flag, can be of any color, as they do. And this by definition is impossible for the other side to do. The other side can't experience grief and can't experience and associate on an emotional level the same form of suffering as you do for your symbolism, for something that is yours, right? And the right is doing it under the pretext, but look at his humanity. As a human being, Charlie Kirk, again, is as much or as little a human being as anybody else. And Republicans cannot expect more of an emotional reaction to his passing than the passing of any random person. And just as they don't have emotional reactions to the passing of any other random person, they can't expect liberals to have an emotional reaction to his passing as well. And yet they do expect the impossible. And this is an impossible situation. This is an impossible situation from here on, because you're expecting the other side to have the proper emotions, to have the right kind of emotions in this very situation. which is impossible for them to have. And if they don't have those emotions, you interpret this is a sign of their inhumanity, of them being not human. While it is precisely an expression of humanity, of being human, that your emotion is entangled with your worldview and with the narratives that are driving you. And the emotions that you get are not by virtue of just simply witnessing events, but the emotions that you get, the strong emotions, positive and negative, that you get, are by virtue of being picked up by your narrative as something that is relevant for you. When you see a child starving in Gaza, and when you see a child starving anywhere else in the world where it's not an active form of war, you experience different emotions. Even though the suffering is the same, the children are equally innocent in both cases. And yet your narrative and your framing makes both events to you entirely different, and one much more proximate, much more close to your experience. The other one is one among millions of others occurring every single day, and not different. The difference is made up by the narrative framework that is driving you and making you experience reality in the first place. And that's not something you can expect the other side to simply shut off. You can't expect the other side to shut off their moral framework and their narrative framework and experience the same thing that you do through your framework. This would be expecting the other side to basically give up. And this is an impossible situation, and this is just going to get much worse. Because from here, I just don't see. I don't see how we're going to depolarize this whole thing, because we're denying each other's humanness, and we're denying basic processes of how human minds work in general, and expecting people to do the impossible, to do something that we ourselves will be incapable of doing. The question is, what could we expect from each other that is doable, and not in the form of, hey, change your emotions and feel the same thing for the same event as I do? That's the question. What could we reasonably expect from each other without the need to want the other side to basically drop their narrative frames and stop interpreting the world and start interpreting it from our point of view? What could we expect from each other that is reasonably possible to be expected? I don't know.